You deserve that. Those words still echo in my ears like an endless sound that never fades away. My name is Laura Evans. I am 59 years old, and this is the story I kept silent for months until the silence itself became unbearable. That night, at my son Ethan's birthday dinner, his wife's mother, Mrs. Catherine Wilson, threw a bowl of boiling hot chicken tortilla soup straight into my face. I felt the searing pain pierce my skin, the tomato and chili burning my eyes, the broth dripping down my ivory silk blouse. But what burned me the most wasn't the soup, it was the smile. That calm, almost satisfied smile she wore as she looked at me with narrowed eyes, as if she had just done something she had been waiting years to do. You deserve that, she repeated, her voice firm, lifting her chin. The dining room fell silent. All the guests stared at their plates. No one moved. No one said a word, except my son, Ethan, my only child, the boy I raised alone after his father abandoned us. The man I gave everything I had to, stayed seated at the head of the table, his arms crossed, and said in a grave voice, "She is right, Mum." I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just picked up the embroidered cloth napkin from my lap, wiped my burning face with all the dignity I had left, and got up from the chair without making a sound. I walked toward the dining room door, my back straight, even though everything inside me was shaking. But before I left that house, I did something no one expected. I pulled my cell phone from my purse, dialed a number I had saved weeks ago, and said just 3 words. "It is time." Then I hung up. I closed the door softly behind me. No one followed me. No one asked anything. I got into my car, started the engine, and as I drove through the dark streets of Beverly Hills toward my empty apartment, only one question spun in my head. How did I get here? Because there was a time when Ethan would hug me and say, "You are my hero, Mum." There was a time when I believed a son's love was forever. There was a time when I trusted. But that night, with my face burning and my heart broken, I understood something I never thought I would have to learn. Sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones who betray us. And sometimes, silence is the only weapon we have left. What happened after that call? They never forgot it. But to understand why I did what I did, I must first tell you how it all started. How a mother who gave everything ended up being humiliated in front of a table full of strangers. And how I discovered, too late, that my son was hiding a secret that would change everything. Sometimes we trust the wrong people too much. Have you also been disappointed by someone you loved? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read it. 3 years ago, my life was different. Not perfect, but it was mine. I lived in a spacious apartment in Brooklyn with a balcony full of red geraniums and bougainvillea that I watered every morning. I had my routine. Filter coffee at 7 o'clock in the morning, a croissant from Mr. Rodriguez's bakery on the corner, and then I would open my little fine sewing shop on the first floor of the building. I wasn't rich, but I didn't need to be. After Ethan's father left us when my son was only 5 years old, I learned something that many women take decades to understand. That you can hold up an entire life with your own hands without asking anyone for permission. I sewed wedding dresses, prom gowns, embroidered blouses for society ladies who wanted to look elegant without screaming about their money. My hands knew every stitch, every hem, every secret a fabric holds when you treat it with patience. Ethan grew up seeing that. He saw me get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to finish an order. He saw me sew until my fingers bled. He saw me cry from exhaustion over the Singer machine that had been my grandmother's, and then wipe my tears and keep going. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to work hard so you can rest," he would tell me with his large, serious eyes, while I prepared him pancakes for school. And I believed him. Because Ethan was always a good kid, responsible, affectionate. He studied without me asking him to. He got good grades. On Sundays, he helped me clean the shop and asked me things about fabrics, about colors, about how I knew what dress each client needed. Because I listened to them, I would say. People always tell you what they need, even if they don't use words. He would nod, thoughtful, and then go play baseball with the kids in the building. When he turned 18 years old and went to study business administration at the New York University, NYU, I felt that all the sacrifice had been worth it. My son was going to have what I never had: a career, a degree, a future without back pain or numb fingers. I worked double, triple. I sewed dresses for weddings of families who would never invite me to their tables, but who paid well. I saved every dollar. I refused help. I refused loans. Because I wanted Ethan to finish college without owing anyone anything. And he did it. He graduated with honors. He got a job at a real estate company. He started earning well, dressing in suits that I adjusted myself, bringing me flowers every Sunday when he came to eat. "Thank you, Mom," he would say, kissing my forehead. "Everything I am is because of you." And I felt complete. Until he met Valerie. The first time Ethan told me about her, I noticed something different in his voice, a new emotion, a sparkle in his eyes I had never seen. "She is special, Mom. Very special." Valerie was the only daughter of a wealthy family from Beverly Hills. Her father owned a chain of hardware stores. Her mother, Mrs. Catherine Wilson, was one of those women who had never worked, but who knew how to command like a general. When Ethan told me he wanted to introduce us, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one with the embroidered neckline that I had made for a distant cousin's wedding. I fixed my hair, put on the pearl earrings that had been my mother's. I wanted to make a good impression. The date was at a restaurant in Beverly Hills that I would never have chosen. Too elegant, too expensive. But Ethan insisted. "I want you to get to know each other well, Mum. Valerie is important to me." Valerie arrived in an impeccable white dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was pretty, educated, but cold. We talked about things that weren't important. The weather, her career in interior design, the wedding plans she was already imagining, even though Ethan and she had only been dating for 6 months. I smiled. I nodded. I asked all the right questions, but something in my stomach twisted when she said, "My mum is anxious to meet you, Mrs. Laura. I have told her a lot about you." The way she said Mrs. Laura sounded strange, as if my name needed a title to exist in her world. Ethan took my hand and squeezed it, as if telling me, "Everything is going to be fine, Mum." And I wanted to believe him, because back then I still believed that a son's love was stronger than anything else. I still believed that what we had built together, just the two of us for so many years, was unbreakable. I still didn't know that some women see other women as enemies from the very first moment. And I still didn't know that Mrs. Catherine Wilson had already decided, long before meeting me, that I was not enough for her family. That afternoon, when we left the restaurant, Ethan hugged me tight and said, "Valerie adored you, Mum." He told me in the car. I smiled, but deep down, a small, cold voice whispered something I didn't want to hear. That girl is lying, and Mrs. Catherine Wilson is too. 3 months later, I was invited to dinner at their house. That's when everything began to crack. Mrs. Catherine Wilson's house in Beverly Hills was exactly as I imagined. Huge, cold, and full of things no one needs. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, oil paintings with gold frames, furniture that looked like it was fresh out of a decor magazine, so perfect it was scary to dirty it just by looking. When Ethan and I arrived that night, Mrs. Catherine Wilson greeted us at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Laura, it's good to see you," she said, giving me 2 air kisses without actually touching my cheek. Come in, come in. Make yourself at home." But I didn't feel at home. I felt like an intruder. Valerie appeared from the stairs, radiant in a blush pink dress, which probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. She greeted me with the same polite, empty smile as always. "Mrs. Laura, you look lovely." That Mrs. Laura again. As if my name only existed with that prefix that made me feel old, foreign, from another world. Mrs. Catherine Wilson's husband, Mr. Arnold, was a stocky man with a hoarse voice who barely shook my hand before returning to his armchair in front of the television. He didn't say much all night. He just grunted now and then and drank bourbon. Ethan seemed happy, comfortable, as if that house were more his than our small apartment in Brooklyn where he had grown up. That hurt me more than I wanted to admit. The dinner was served by a young maid who came in and out of the kitchen silently, her eyes lowered. Mrs. Catherine Wilson didn't even look at her when she asked for something. "More water, Lily. And bring the bread." I tried to smile at the girl when she served me. She gave me a quick, almost grateful look before disappearing again. The conversation during dinner was tense from the start. Mrs. Catherine Wilson talked about her friends from the country club, about the vacations they were planning in Palm Springs, about the new SUV that Mr. Arnold had bought. "Because one can't just drive around in anything, right, Laura?" she said with a light laugh. "One has to maintain a certain standard." I nodded, not knowing what to say. Valerie intervened, touching Ethan's arm with a possessive gesture. "Mum, I already told Nico, Ethan, that when we get married, he has to think about a bigger car. That car he has is very modest." Ethan laughed, uncomfortable. "The car is fine, honey. It works for me." "But we are going to have kids, aren't we?" Valerie insisted in a syrupy voice. "We need space, security. Besides, my dad can help you with the down payment." I felt a knot in my stomach. My son had bought that car with his own money. I had seen him work hard to get it. And now this girl talked about it as if it were an embarrassment. "I think Ethan knows what is best for him," I said, my voice calm but firm. Mrs. Catherine Wilson stared at me for the first time all night. "Of course, Laura. Ethan is a very intelligent young man. That is why I am sure he will make the right decisions for his future, for his new family." The way she said his new family was like a silent slap, as if I were no longer part of that future. Ethan didn't say anything. He just kept eating, his head bowed. And I understood something terrible in that moment. My son was letting them push me aside. Mrs. Catherine Wilson continued talking. Now about the wedding. "Valerie and I are already looking at churches. The wedding will be at St. Patrick's Cathedral, of course. It is where my parents, my grandparents, and the whole family got married. And the reception will be at the Plaza Hotel. Nothing too ostentatious, but elegant. Because you have to do things right, right?" I nodded, feeling my throat tighten. No one had asked me anything. No one had included me in those plans. It was as if my son's wedding didn't belong to me. "And what do you think, Laura?" Mrs. Catherine Wilson suddenly asked, with that fake smile. "Do you like the idea?" "It seems beautiful," I said, forcing a smile. "The important thing is that Ethan and Valerie are happy." "Exactly," she said, taking her glass of wine. "The important thing is that they are happy, and that they start well, without burdens, without burdens." The word hung in the air like poison. Valerie got up to go to the restroom. Mr. Arnold fell asleep in his armchair. And Mrs. Catherine Wilson took that moment to lean toward me, her voice low but clear. Laura, you seem like a reasonable woman, so I am going to be direct with you. Ethan is a good young man, but he is used to a certain life, a simple life, and that is fine. But now he is going to be part of our family, and our family has expectations. Expectations, I repeated, feeling the heat rise up my neck. Yes, expectations. Valerie needs stability, a husband who can provide, and Ethan needs to focus on his future, not on the past. Her eyes pierced me. The past? I whispered. Don't misunderstand me, Laura. I know you have done a lot for your son. That is admirable. But now it is time for him to fly solo, without ties, without emotional dependencies. I felt as if a knife had been plunged into my chest. I have never been a burden to my son, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Of course not, she said, smiling. But now Ethan has other priorities, and I am sure that you, as a good mother, will know how to step aside when necessary. I couldn't answer. Because just then Valerie returned from the restroom, Ethan smiled again as if nothing had happened, and the maid brought dessert. Flan with caramel sauce. I didn't take a bite. When dinner was over, Mrs. Catherine Wilson gave me a small box. A little something, Laura, so you think of us. Inside was a fine porcelain cup, white with gold edges, elegant, expensive, cold. Thank you, I said, without looking her in the eyes. In the car, on the way back to my apartment, Ethan was quiet. I was too. Finally, when we arrived in front of my building, he broke the silence. Did you like Mrs. Catherine Wilson, Mum? I looked at him, searching in his eyes for the boy he had been. The boy who hugged me and told me, "You are my hero." But that boy was no longer there. She seems like a strong woman, I said, choosing my words carefully. Yeah? He replied, smiling. She is amazing. Valerie and she are very close. It is nice to see that. And us? I wanted to scream. We weren't close, but I didn't say anything. I just got out of the car, said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek, and climbed the stairs to my empty apartment. That night, while preparing coffee in my old coffee maker and looking out the window at the city lighters, I held the cup that Mrs. Catherine Wilson had given me in my hands. It was beautiful, perfect. But when I brought it to my lips, I couldn't drink the coffee I had just poured, because that cup wasn't a gift. It was a message. You do not belong in our world. I left it on the table, untouched, and picked up my old clay mug, the one I had used every morning for years. That one was mine. That one knew the taste of my life. And as I silently drank my coffee, a question began to grow inside me like a dark plant. How far would this woman go to get me out of my son's life? I didn't know yet, but I would soon find out. As I tell all this, I wonder where you are listening to me. Write the name of your city in the comments. The following months were like walking on broken glass barefoot. Every step hurt, but I kept going, smiling, telling myself that everything would be fine, that it was normal, that this is how things are when a son gets married, that I had to learn to let go. But the truth is, they weren't letting me let go. They were tearing me away. Ethan started visiting me less. Before, he came every Sunday without fail. He arrived with donuts, helped me move the furniture to clean, stayed for lunch, and told me everything about his week. But after that dinner at Mrs. Catherine Wilson's house, the visits became every 2 weeks, then monthly, then sporadic, always with the same excuse. Sorry, Mum. Valerie and I had plans with her family. Sorry, Mum. Mrs. Catherine Wilson invited us to lunch at the club. Sorry, Mum. We have to look at wedding things. Always Valerie, always Mrs. Catherine Wilson, always them. I would say that it was okay, that I understood, that he was busy, but inside something was dying little by little. One afternoon, Ethan called me to say that Valerie wanted me to go with them to choose the wedding dress. Really? I asked, my heart leaping in my chest. Yes, Mum. Valerie insisted. She says you are an expert in fabrics and wants your opinion. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Maybe I had been wrong about Valerie. Maybe she did want to include me. Maybe it was just a matter of giving it time. The day of the appointment, I arrived 30 minutes early to the boutique, an elegant store on Rodeo Drive, with dresses that cost what I earned in 6 months. Valerie arrived late, accompanied by Mrs. Catherine Wilson and 3 friends who kept laughing and taking pictures with their phones. "Mrs. Laura," Valerie said, kissing my cheek, "it's good you came. We need your expert eye." I sat on a velvet armchair while she tried on dress after dress, all beautiful, all expensive, all the same to my eyes. The friends clapped. Mrs. Catherine Wilson gave orders to the employee, and I was there, quiet, without anyone asking me anything, until Valerie came out in a strapless French lace dress with an endless train. "What do you think, Mrs. Laura?" she asked, turning in front of the mirror. All eyes turned toward me. I took a deep breath and told the truth. "It is beautiful, but I think the strapless cut doesn't suit you as much. You have delicate shoulders. A dress with lace sleeves or thin straps would better highlight your figure." The silence was immediate. The friends stopped smiling. Mrs. Catherine Wilson looked at me with cold eyes, and Valerie let out a nervous laugh. "Oh well, this kind of dress is what is fashionable, Mrs. Laura. I don't know if you are very up to date with the trends." Her friends laughed, quietly but enough for me to hear it. Mrs. Catherine Wilson got up and put a hand on Valerie's shoulder. "My darling, you look spectacular in everything. Don't worry, this dress is perfect. We are going to take it." Valerie smiled, relieved. "Yes, Mum, you are right." Mum. Valerie had called Mrs. Catherine Wilson Mum, and she was still calling me Mrs. Laura. I stayed seated in that velvet armchair, invisible, while they continued talking about veils, headpieces, and designer shoes. No one asked me anything again. When we left the boutique, Ethan was waiting for us outside. Valerie ran toward him and showed him photos of the dress. "Don't I look gorgeous, honey?" "You are going to be the most beautiful bride in the world," he said, kissing her. I stayed behind, carrying my purse, feeling like a shadow. Ethan finally saw me. "How was it, Mum? Did you like the dress?" "It's beautiful," I said, forcing a smile. "Thanks for coming. I know this is important to Valerie." "And to you?" I wanted to scream. "Isn't it important to you that I am here?" But I only nodded. "Of course, honey. That is what I am here for." Mrs. Catherine Wilson approached, took Ethan's arm, and said in a soft voice, "Ethan, are you joining us for lunch? We need to discuss the final details of the wedding." "Of course, Mrs. Wilson." "Mum is coming too, right?" Valerie asked, looking at me with that polite, empty smile. Before I could answer, Mrs. Catherine Wilson said, "Oh no, my dear. I am sure Laura is tired. Besides, we are going to talk about very specific organizational things. We don't want to bore her." Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't defend me. He didn't insist. He didn't say, "My mum is coming with us." He just said goodbye with a kiss on the cheek and left with them. I stood on the street, watching them walk away, and for the first time, I cried in public. Not a lot, just a few quick tears that I wiped with the back of my hand before anyone saw me. I took the subway back to my apartment. I didn't want to spend money on a taxi. When I got home, I prepared coffee in my clay mug, the same as always, the one that knew the taste of my life. The porcelain cup that Mrs. Catherine Wilson had given me was still on the table, untouched, gathering dust. I looked at it for a long time, and something inside me whispered, "This is not going to get better. It is only going to get worse." But I didn't want to listen, because I still believed that a son's love was stronger than any external influence. I still believed that Ethan was going to wake up, that he was going to realize, that he was going to be the boy who hugged me and told me, "You are my hero." So I kept going. I kept smiling when they excluded me. I kept saying, "It is okay," when everything was wrong. I kept swallowing the pain so as not to be a problem, so as not to be a burden, so as not to fulfill the prophecy that Mrs. Catherine Wilson had planted in my son's mind. "Your mum is going to smother you if you don't stay away." 2 weeks later, Ethan invited me to dinner. Just the two of us, like before. I was so excited that I arrived 30 minutes early to the restaurant. I had dressed carefully. I wore a wine-coloured dress that I had sewn myself, with subtle embroidery on the neckline. I wanted my son to be proud of me. But when he arrived, he wasn't alone. Valerie was with him. "Sorry, Mum. Valerie wanted to come along. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not," I lied. During the entire dinner, Valerie talked non-stop. About the wedding, about the honeymoon they were planning in Hawaii, about the apartment her father was going to give them as a wedding gift. "It is in Beverly Hills, Mrs. Laura. 3 bedrooms, 2 full bathrooms, and a terrace with an incredible view. My dad says it is important to start well." Ethan was happy. I just smiled. And when the bill came, Ethan took out his wallet and said something that broke my heart in two. "Mom, can you lend me $2,000? I spent a lot on wedding things this month and I am a little tight." $2,000. I didn't have $2,000 extra. I barely had enough to pay my rent and the shop expenses. But I took out the money I had saved for the electricity and gave it to him. "Of course, honey. Don't worry." "Thanks, Mum. I will pay you back next month." He never paid me back, and I never asked him for it. Because in that moment, I understood something terrible. I was no longer his mother. I was his bank, his safety net, his plan B, but I was no longer the most important person in his life. That night, when I returned to my apartment, I sat in front of the window with my coffee and looked at the city lights. And I wondered how I had gotten there. How a woman who had given everything, who had sacrificed her youth, her health, her entire life for a son, could end up feeling so invisible. But I still didn't know the truth. I still didn't know that everything that had happened up to that moment was only the beginning. That Mrs. Catherine Wilson had a plan, and that my son, my Ethan, my only child, was already part of it. The wedding was approaching like an inevitable storm, and I kept pretending that everything was fine. Ethan would go weeks without calling me. When he did, the conversations were brief, distracted, full of awkward silences. "How are you, Mum?" "Fine, honey. And you?" "Good, good. Busy with the preparations, I imagine." "Well, I have to go. Valerie is calling me." Click. And I would be left with the phone in my hand, feeling something inside me empty out a little more each time. But the short calls weren't the worst part. The worst part was the invitations that never came. I found out by chance that there had been a bachelor party for Ethan, a barbecue at Mr. Arnold's house, with live music, with Valerie's family friends. No one told me. There was also a rehearsal dinner at a super expensive Italian restaurant. with the godparents, with the close family. No one invited me. When I asked Ethan why they hadn't included me, he got uncomfortable. "Oh, Mum, they were small, last-minute things. We didn't want to bother you." Bother me, as if my presence were a nuisance, as if I were a problem to be avoided. But I kept quiet. I kept smiling. I kept saying, "Don't worry, honey, I understand." Until one afternoon, everything changed. It was a Tuesday. I remember it because Tuesdays have always been slow days at the shop. I was finishing sewing the hem of a sweet 16 dress when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and found a young delivery guy with a blue cap and a manila envelope in his hands. "Laura Evans?" "Yes, that's me." "Sign here, please." I signed without thinking. The guy gave me the envelope and left. I closed the door and looked at the package. It had no return address, only my name written by hand in black ink. Something in my stomach twisted. I sat on the shop couch with trembling hands and opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, many photographs. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. They were images of Ethan, my son, in different places, restaurants, a parking lot, the entrance of a hotel. But he wasn't alone. He was with a woman, and that woman wasn't Valerie. It was Mrs. Catherine Wilson. I felt the floor moving beneath my feet. The first photo showed Ethan and Mrs. Catherine Wilson leaving a restaurant. He had his hand on the small of her back. She was laughing, her head thrown back. The second photo was in a parking lot. Ethan was opening the car door for her. Their faces were very close. Too close. The third photo took the air out of my lungs. It was at the entrance of a hotel, the St. Regis. Ethan and Mrs. Catherine Wilson were going in together. He had one arm around her waist. She was looking at him with a smile I had never seen on her. An intimate smile. A smile of a woman who knows a man's body. I let the photographs fall to the floor. My hands were shaking so much I couldn't hold them. My heart was beating so hard I felt it was going to burst. No, 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 no. This can't be real. I picked up the photos with clumsy fingers. I looked at them again and again, looking for a logical explanation. Maybe it was a business lunch. Maybe Mrs. Catherine Wilson needed help with something. Maybe. But there were more photos. Ethan kissing Mrs. Catherine Wilson's cheek, too close to the lips. Mrs. Catherine Wilson adjusting Ethan's tie, her hands on his chest, both of them entering an apartment. An address I didn't know. And the last photo, the one that made me let out a moan I didn't know I had inside. Ethan and Mrs. Catherine Wilson on a balcony. At night, he was hugging her from behind. Her eyes were closed, leaning against his chest, like two lovers who have shared something forbidden. I got up from the couch, stumbling. I ran to the bathroom. I threw up. I threw up everything inside me until there were only dry heaves and a bitter taste in my mouth. I stayed there, kneeling in front of the toilet, crying uncontrollably. My son, my only son, the boy I raised alone, the boy I gave everything to, the boy who called me his hero, was having an affair with his fiancée's mother, with a woman 20 years older than him, with the woman who had humiliated me again and again. And suddenly everything made sense. That is why Mrs. Catherine Wilson hated me so much. That is why she had wanted me out of Ethan's life from the beginning. It wasn't because I was poor or simple or from another world. It was because I was her rival, the real mother, the one who knew Ethan from before, the one who could see what she had done to him. And that is why Ethan had abandoned me, not for Valerie, for Mrs. Catherine Wilson, for that woman who had seduced him, manipulated him, turned him into her toy. I stayed on the bathroom floor for I don't know how long, crying, shaking, feeling everything I thought I knew about my life crumble. When I could finally get up, I washed my face with cold water and returned to the shop. The photographs were still there, scattered on the couch. I picked them up one by one, with hands that no longer trembled, because the shock was giving way to something else. Something cold. Something hard. Something I didn't know existed inside me. I put the photos back in the envelope, and I sat in front of my sewing machine, looking at the black thread hanging from the needle. I thought about all the times Mrs. Catherine Wilson had humiliated me. I thought about all the times Ethan had ignored me. I thought about the approaching wedding, about Valerie, that poor girl who had no idea that her fiancé was sleeping with her own mother. And I thought about myself, the woman who had worked until she bled to give her son a better life. The woman who had swallowed insults and contempt without saying anything. The woman who had believed that a son's love was forever. That woman was dead. And in her place was someone new, someone who was no longer going to stay silent. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved months ago, when a client had told me about a private investigator who had helped her uncover her husband's infidelity. "Good afternoon. This is Laura Evans. I need your services." The voice on the other end of the phone was professional, neutral. "Tell me how I can help you, ma'am." "I need more information, more proof, dates, locations, everything you can get on two people." "Their names?" "Ethan Evans Ramirez and Catherine Valdez Wilson." There was a pause. "Any relation between them?" "Yes," I said, my voice no longer trembling. "He is my son, and she is the mother of his fiancée." Another pause. Longer. "I understand. And what do you plan to do with the information, Mrs. Evans?" I looked out the shop window. The city lights were beginning to turn on. The sky was tinged with orange and violet. "I don't know yet," I said. "But when I do know, I want to be prepared. I will send you my quote by email." "And Mrs. Evans?" "Yes?" "Some truths hurt more than lies. Are you sure you want to know?" I closed my eyes. I thought about my son, the boy he had been, the man he had become, and I said something I never thought I would say. It no longer matters what hurts. I need the truth. I hung up the phone. I made myself a coffee in my clay mug, and I waited. Because now I knew that the wedding was not the end of this story. It was only the beginning, and I was no longer going to be the silent victim. I was going to be the woman who knew, the woman who waited, the woman who, at the right moment, would make a single call. And everything would crumble. Have you also kept a painful secret? Have you discovered something that changed everything you thought you knew? Tell me in the comments. The private investigator's name was Robert Salazar. He was a man in his 50s, common-looking, with glasses and a calm voice that inspired confidence. We met at a discreet coffee shop in Greenwich Village, far from anywhere anyone could recognize me. He brought me a thick manila folder, full of papers, photographs, and reports. "Mrs. Evans," he said in a calm voice, "I found what you asked for, but before I show you, I need you to take a deep breath." "I already know what I am going to see," I said, my hands clasped on the table. "No," he replied, looking me in the eyes. "Believe me, you don't know." He opened the folder, and my world finished breaking. The first photos were similar to the ones I had received in the anonymous envelope. Ethan and Mrs. Catherine Wilson in restaurants, in hotels, in an apartment in the Upper East Side that, according to the investigator, she had rented specifically for their encounters. "This apartment is under the name of a shell company," Robert explained. but I tracked the payments. They all come out of Mrs. Catherine Wilson's personal account. I felt nauseous again, but I forced myself to keep looking. There were hotel records, the St. Regis, the Four Seasons, rooms reserved in her name, but the security cameras showed both of them going in together. "Since when?" I asked, in a voice I barely recognized as my own. Robert flipped through several pages and pointed to a date. "The first record I found is from 1.5 years ago." 1.5 years. My son had been sleeping with his fiancée's mother for 1.5 years, since before Valerie and he got engaged, since before I met that family. "There is more," Robert said, in a grave tone. He showed me bank statements, transfers from Mrs. Catherine Wilson's account to Ethan's account. Large amounts. $10,000 here, $20,000 there, $50,000 on one occasion. "What is this?" I whispered. "Payments," Robert said. "Your son is receiving money from her, regularly." The word hung in the air like poison. Payments. My son was not only having an affair with that woman, he was letting her support him. "There is something else," Robert continued, "and it is the most delicate." He took out another set of documents. "I investigated Mr. Arnold's finances. Mrs. Catherine Wilson's husband is bankrupt. The chain of hardware stores, which is supposedly so successful, is on the verge of collapse. He has debts with several banks, and the house in Beverly Hills has 3 mortgages." I remained silent, processing. "So everything is a lie?" I asked. "The wealth, the money, the status." "It is a facade," Robert confirmed, "a very well-constructed facade. But it is falling apart, and I believe Mrs. Catherine Wilson knows it. That's why she is using her daughter." "Using Valerie? How?" Robert took out more papers. "Valerie inherited a considerable fortune from her maternal grandmother 2 years ago, close to $80 million in properties and bank accounts. But that money is in a trust that can only be touched under certain conditions." "What conditions?" "That Valerie gets married. Once married, she has complete access to that inheritance. And if something were to happen to Valerie while married, the money automatically passes to her spouse." I felt the air escape from my lungs. "Ethan," I whispered. "Exactly," Robert said. "If Ethan marries Valerie and something happens to her, he inherits everything. And considering the relationship he has with Mrs. Catherine Wilson—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "Do you think they plan to harm Valerie?" I asked, feeling the horror rise in my throat. "I don't have proof of that," Robert said carefully. "But I do have proof that Mrs. Catherine Wilson is a very controlling woman, very ambitious and very desperate. And your son, Mrs. Evans, forgive me for saying this, is completely under her control." I closed my eyes. I thought about my Ethan, the boy who hugged me, the young man who graduated with honors, the man I thought I had raised. At what point had he become this? At what point had he stopped being my son and become the puppet of a woman without scruples? "There is one last thing," Robert said, "and it is the most important." He took out an audio recording, a small device. "I managed to place a microphone in the Upper East Side apartment. It is illegal, I know, but I thought you needed to hear this." He pressed the play button, and I heard my son's voice. "And what if Valerie finds out?" It was Ethan. He sounded nervous, then Catherine Wilson's voice. Soft, manipulative, maternal and seductive at the same time. "She's not going to find out, my love. Valerie is stupid. She only sees what she wants to see. But when we get married, how are we going to continue this? Ethan, listen to me carefully." A pause. Sounds I didn't want to imagine. Then Mrs. Catherine Wilson spoke again, her voice firm. Valerie is not going to be a problem for long. You marry her, you wait 1 year, maybe 2, and then things happen. Accidents happen. Catherine, I can't. Can't what? Can't be happy. Can't have the future you deserve. Ethan, I love you. I love you like Valerie will never love you. And when all this is over, we are going to be together, you and me, with all the money we need, without hiding. A silence, and then my son's voice, so low I barely heard it. All right, I will do what you ask. Robert stopped the recording. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My son, my only son, the boy I raised with my own hands, the boy I taught about kindness, honesty, dignity, was planning to marry an innocent girl to inherit her fortune, and was letting a psychopath put the idea in his head that Valerie had to disappear. What are you going to do, Mrs. Evans? Robert asked, his voice soft. I looked at the photographs scattered on the table. I looked at the documents, the bank statements, the proof of a conspiracy so twisted it seemed straight out of a crime show. But it was real, and it was my son. I don't know, I whispered. I don't know what I'm going to do. You can go to the police, Robert suggested. With this information, they can stop the wedding. They can investigate Mrs. Catherine Wilson. And Ethan? I asked, tears streaming down my cheeks. What would happen to my son? Robert didn't answer, because we both knew the answer. Ethan would go to jail, for fraud, for conspiracy, maybe for attempted homicide if they could prove his intentions. My son would spend years in prison, and I would be the one who put him there. Think about it carefully, Robert said, and when you decide what to do, call me. I will be available. He gave me his card. He paid for the coffee, and he left. I stayed seated in that coffee shop for hours, with the folder in my hands, feeling everything that had been my life turn into ashes. I thought about going to the police. I thought about talking to Valerie, warning her, saving her. I thought about confronting Ethan, screaming at him, asking him how he could have become this. But I didn't do any of that, because I needed something more than justice. I needed Ethan to see, to understand, to feel the weight of what he had done. I needed Mrs. Catherine Wilson to lose everything she had gained with her manipulations, and I needed to do it in a way that no one could say I was the bad guy, because I wasn't going to be the mother who destroyed her son. I was going to be the mother who let him destroy himself. And then, when he was at the bottom, when he had lost everything, maybe, just maybe, he would remember who I was and what he had been before that woman poisoned him. I picked up the folder. I put it in my purse, and I left the coffee shop with my back straight and my head held high. The wedding was in 2 weeks, and I had a plan that started with a simple acceptance. I was going to go to that wedding. I was going to sit at that table. And when the exact moment arrived, I was going to make a call, a single call, and everything would fall apart. Because sometimes the best revenge is not to attack. It is to let the truth do its job. The wedding night arrived like a storm everyone expected but me, because I knew that night was not going to be a celebration. It was going to be a revelation. I got ready carefully. I chose a simple dress, navy blue, that I had sewn myself years ago. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that would draw attention. I tied my hair back in a discreet bun. I put on my mother's pearl earrings. I wanted to look dignified, because I knew that would be the last time Ethan would see me as his mother. The ceremony was at St. Patrick's Cathedral, as Mrs. Catherine Wilson had planned. A beautiful church, full of white flowers and candles. The guests were more than 200. Elegant people. people with money, people who looked at me sideways wondering who that simple woman was sitting alone in the fifth row, because they hadn't even given me a seat in the front rows. Valerie's family occupied the entire right side of the church, and on the left side, where the groom's family should be, there were only 3 people. Me, a distant aunt of Ethan's who barely knew him, and a cousin who came more for the banquet than for affection. That was all that was left of our family. When Ethan walked down the aisle, my heart skipped a beat. He looked handsome, elegant, mature, in a dark grey suit that I knew he hadn't paid for, his hair perfectly combed, with a nervous but happy smile. For a moment, just for a moment, I saw the boy he had been again, and I almost regretted what I was about to do. Almost. But then I saw Mrs. Catherine Wilson. She was sitting in the front row, in a champagne-coloured dress that screamed money, her hair perfectly styled, her jewellery sparkling under the candlelight. And when Ethan passed in front of her on his way to the altar, Mrs. Catherine Wilson gave him a look I knew very well, a look of possession, a look that said, "You are mine." And Ethan responded with a small, complicit, intimate smile, just before standing in front of the altar to wait for his fiancée. I felt bile rise in my throat. Valerie entered, walking arm in arm with her father. She looked beautiful, innocent, radiant. The strapless dress she had chosen despite my advice looked good on her, I had to admit it. Her face glowed with happiness. She didn't know anything. That poor girl had no idea she was walking into her own trap. The ceremony was long. The priest talked about love, fidelity, commitment. Every word was like a dagger in my chest, because I knew everything was a lie. When it was time for the vows, Ethan took Valerie's hands and said in a firm voice, "Valerie, I promise to love and respect you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your support, your refuge. I promise to build a future with you based on truth and trust." I had to bite my lip not to scream, "Liar, liar, liar." Valerie cried with emotion. The guests sighed, and Mrs. Catherine Wilson smiled with satisfaction. When the priest said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," everyone applauded, except me. I just watched them, Ethan kissing Valerie, Mrs. Catherine Wilson wiping a fake tear, Mr. Arnold dozing in his seat. And I knew the moment had come. The reception was at the Plaza Hotel, a huge ballroom decorated with thousands of white roses, tables with linen tablecloths, crystal centerpieces, a 5-course banquet, live orchestra music. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. They seated me at a table in the back, far from the main table, far from Ethan, with people I didn't know and who didn't speak to me all night. I was invisible. Again. But I wasn't there to socialize. I was there to wait for the exact moment. During dinner, I observed. I saw how Mrs. Catherine Wilson controlled everything from her seat at the main table, how she gave discreet orders to the waiters, how she looked at Ethan every time Valerie wasn't looking. And I saw how Ethan returned those looks. It was disgusting. It was blatant. It was sickening. When dinner was over, the dancing began, the newlywed waltz, the dance with the parents. Ethan danced with Valerie first, then it was the groom's mother's turn to dance, with me. I got up from my table, walked onto the dance floor. Everyone looked at me. Ethan extended his hand to me with a forced smile. "Mum." "Son," I replied, taking his hand. We danced in silence for the first few seconds. The music was soft, romantic. Everyone was watching us. "You look beautiful, Mum," he said, without looking me in the eyes. "Thank you," I replied. "You look good too." Another silence. "Are you happy?" I asked him. "Yes," he answered quickly. "Very happy." "Are you really, Ethan?" Are you really happy? For the first time all night, he looked me in the eyes, and I saw something there, something small, something that was maybe guilt, or maybe just discomfort. Yes, Mum, Valerie is wonderful. We are going to be very happy together. And Mrs. Catherine Wilson? I asked, lowering my voice. Is she wonderful too? His body tensed. He stopped dancing for a second. Then he continued, squeezing my hand tighter. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do know, son. Mum, this is not the time. When is the time going to be, Ethan? When? After something happens to Valerie? After you inherit her money? He stopped completely. He let go of me. He looked at me with hard eyes. What did you say? I know everything, Ethan. Everything. The music continued playing, but we were no longer dancing. People were starting to look at us, to murmur. You don't know anything, he said in a low, threatening voice. You are making things up. I have photographs. I have hotel records. I have bank statements. I have recordings. His face paled. Mom! What did that woman do to you, Ethan? What did she do to you to make you become this? You don't understand, he exploded, raising his voice. You will never understand. The music stopped. Everyone was looking at us. Valerie rushed over, her wedding dress dragging on the floor. What is going on? Ethan, Mrs. Laura. Mrs. Catherine Wilson appeared out of nowhere. She stepped between Ethan and me. Laura, I think it is best if you leave. You are making a scene. A scene, I repeated, feeling the rage rise in my chest. I am making a scene? Yes, she said in a firm voice. This is my daughter's wedding, and I will not allow you to ruin it with your dramas. My dramas? I laughed without humour. You want to talk about dramas, Catherine? Valerie was looking at us, confused. Ethan was paralysed. The guests were murmuring louder and louder. And then Mrs. Catherine Wilson did something I will never forget. She turned toward the main table, picked up a deep bowl of chicken tortilla soup that was still hot, walked toward me with firm steps, and threw it in my face. I felt the boiling liquid burning my skin, the tomato, the chili, the broth dripping down my dress, the pain, the humiliation. Everyone screamed. Valerie shrieked. Someone ran for napkins. But I didn't move. I just stood there, the soup dripping down my face, looking at Mrs. Catherine Wilson straight in the eyes. She smiled, that calm smile, that satisfied smile. And she said, her voice clear for everyone to hear, "You deserve that." The ballroom fell into complete silence. And then Ethan, my son, my only son, the boy I had raised alone, crossed his arms and said, "She is right, Mum." Those words cut me deeper than any knife. Valerie was crying. The guests were murmuring. Mr. Arnold was still asleep in his chair. And I just took a napkin from the nearest table and wiped my burning face with all the dignity I had left. Then I walked toward the exit of the ballroom, my back straight, without running, without crying, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. But before leaving, I took my phone from my purse, dialed the number I had saved, and said just 3 words. It is time. I hung up, left the ballroom, got into my car, and as I drove through the dark streets toward my apartment, my face burning and my heart broken into 1,000 pieces, I smiled. Because the call I had just made was not to the police. It was to someone else, someone who was going to change everything, and they would never forget it. I still wonder if I did the right thing. And you? What would you have done in my place? I arrived at my apartment with the dress ruined and my soul even more ruined, but I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I took off the dress, soaked with soup, and threw it in the trash. I never wanted to see it again. I took a long shower, letting the hot water clean my skin that was still burning. When I got out, I put on my old cotton pajamas, the one with holes in the elbows, the one I had worn for years, the one that was mine, and no one else's. I made myself a coffee in my clay mug, the same as always, the one that knew the taste of my life. And I sat in front of the window to wait, because I knew that the call I had made was going to have consequences, consequences that would begin that very night. The person I had called was not the police, not a lawyer, not anyone who could put my son in jail. It was someone much more powerful than all that. It was Valerie's grandfather, Mr. Sebastian Wells, the father of Valerie's mother, the man who had left that $80 million in a trust for his granddaughter. A man of 82 years old, a widower, a retired businessman, one of those who built empires with their own hands and who did not tolerate lies or betrayal. I had met him months ago at one of the few family gatherings I had been invited to. It was at a casual lunch at Mrs. Catherine Wilson's house. I was quiet in my corner, invisible as always, when Mr. Sebastian Wells sat next to me. "You are the boy's mother, right?" he asked me in a hoarse but kind voice. "Yes, sir. I am Laura." "Laura," he repeated, tasting my name. "Nice name. And what do you do, Laura?" "I have a sewing shop. I make dresses, alterations." "Ah, you work with your hands, like me. I like that. People who work with their hands have soul." We talked throughout the lunch. He told me about his life, about how he had started selling tools at the flea market and had ended up owning a chain of hardware stores across the country, about how he had worked 14 hours a day for 50 years, about how he had been widowed 10 years ago and still missed his wife every morning. "My daughter Catherine doesn't visit me much," he said sadly. "She says I'm old, that I smell old, that my house is full of junk." "I am sure she loves you very much," I said, trying to be kind. "No," he replied with brutal honesty. "My daughter loves me for my money, but I don't have money anymore. I left everything to my granddaughter Valerie, because she does visit me. She does hug me. She still has a heart." He gave me his card that day. "If you ever need anything, Laura, call me. I like people who work with their hands." I kept that card in my wallet, and 3 weeks after receiving the photographs, I called him. We met at his house, an old house in Boston, full of antique furniture and family photographs. He received me with coffee and donuts. "Tell me, Laura, what is so urgent?" I showed him everything: the photographs, the bank statements, the recordings, the documents that proved the conspiracy. Mr. Sebastian Wells listened in silence. His face changed color, first pale, then red, then purple with rage. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. "My granddaughter is in danger," he finally said, his voice trembling. "Yes, sir." "And your son?" "Your son's part of the plan." "Yes, sir." "Why are you telling me? Why don't you go to the police?" It took me a moment to answer. Because I had to be honest. Because if I go to the police, my son goes to jail. And no matter how much he has betrayed me, no matter how much he has become someone I don't recognize, he is still my son. I can't be the one who puts him in prison. Mr. Sebastian Wells nodded slowly. "But I can be," he said. "I just want Valerie to be safe," I replied. "And I want my son to understand what he has done, to see the consequences, to feel the weight of his decisions. And Catherine, to pay for what she has done, for manipulating my son, for putting him on this path, for planning to harm an innocent girl." Mr. Sebastian Wells took my hand in his, old hands, full of spots and wrinkles, but still strong. Laura, you are a wise and brave woman. I am going to help you, but I need you to promise me something. Anything, Mr. Wells. When everything explodes, and believe me, it is going to explode, you are going to suffer. Your son is going to hate you. People are going to talk. You are going to be alone. I am already alone, I said in a calm voice. No, he replied. You still have hope. But when this is over, that hope is going to die. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Ethan, the boy he had been, the man he had become, and I said, yes, I am prepared. Mr. Sebastian Wells nodded. Then this is what we are going to do. You are going to go to that wedding. You are going to behave normally. And when the moment comes, when they show their true colours, you are going to call me, and I am going to do what I have to do. What are you going to do? First, I am going to get Valerie out of that house that very night. I have lawyers, I have doctors. I am going to prove that my daughter is incapable of caring for her own daughter. I am going to get a restraining order. And the money? The trust is going to be frozen. Immediately. Neither Valerie nor anyone will be able to touch that money until a judge decides what to do. And believe me, with the evidence we have, the judge is going to decide in my favour. And Ethan? Mr. Sebastian Wells looked at me sadly. Your son is not going to jail, because technically he has not committed any crime yet. He is just a fool who allowed himself to be manipulated by a woman without scruples, but he is going to lose everything. The marriage, the money, the family, the reputation. He is going to be left with nothing. Good, I said firmly. That is exactly what he deserves. And that is how we arrived at this moment. Me, sitting in my apartment, drinking coffee, waiting. At 11 o'clock at night, my phone rang. It was Mr. Sebastian Wells. It is done, Laura. What happened? I arrived at the Plaza Hotel with my lawyers and 2 police cars. I told Valerie I needed to talk to her urgently. When she saw the photographs, when she heard the recordings, she fainted. We had to take her to the hospital. My God, is she okay? Physically, she is fine, but emotionally, that girl is destroyed. I am so sorry. It is not your fault, Laura. It is my daughter's fault, and that young man's. What happened to Ethan? And to Mrs. Catherine Wilson? Ethan tried to explain. He tried to say that everything was a lie, but when he saw the proof, he fell silent. He just stood there in his wedding suit, surrounded by guests who murmured and pointed at him without saying anything. And Mrs. Catherine Wilson? That woman, Mr. Sebastian Wells' voice was filled with contempt, tried to deny everything. She said the photos were edited, that the recordings were fake, that it was a conspiracy against her. Did they believe her? Of course not. The scandal was monumental. The guests ran out. The hotel employees didn't know what to do. And Mr. Arnold, that useless man, slept through the whole drama. And now? Now Valerie is in my custody. We are going to annul the marriage. It was the same night, so legally it is as if it never existed. The trust is frozen, and I filed a complaint against Catherine for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit homicide. Is she going to jail? If God wills it, yes. The lawyers say we have a solid case. Thank you, Mr. Wells. Thank you for protecting Valerie. No, Laura. Thank you for letting me know in time. You saved my granddaughter's life. There was a silence. And your son? Mr. Sebastian Wells asked. Do you want to know about him? I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. Tell me. He left the hotel at 2 o'clock in the morning, alone, with no one. The guests looked at him with contempt. No one defended him. No one helped him. He left in his car, and I don't know where he went. I understand. Laura, your son lost everything tonight. How do you feel? How did I feel? Empty, sad, relieved, guilty, vindicated, all at the same time. I feel at peace, I finally said, because I did the right thing. Yes, Mr. Sebastian Wells replied. You did the right thing. Not many mothers have that strength. We hung up. I stayed seated in front of the window, my empty clay mug in my hands. Outside, the city was still alive. Lights, noise, people living their lives. And I was here, alone, but with a clear conscience. Because it hadn't been revenge I sought. It was justice. Justice for Valerie, who didn't deserve to be used. Justice for me, who didn't deserve to be humiliated. And justice for Ethan, who needed to understand that actions have consequences. I hadn't put him in jail, but I had left him with nothing. No money, no family, no reputation. And maybe, just maybe, when he hit rock bottom, when he lost everything, when he was completely alone, he would remember who I was, and what he had been before Mrs. Catherine Wilson's poison corrupted him. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months, without nightmares, without anguish, without that knot in my stomach that had accompanied me since I received those first photographs. Because I had done what I had to do, not with rage, not with a thirst for revenge, but with the cold clarity of someone who understands that sometimes the greatest love you can give someone is to let them face the consequences of their own decisions, even if that means seeing them fall, even if that means losing them forever. The days after the wedding were strange, silent, as if the world had stopped. I didn't hear anything from Ethan for 1 week. He didn't call, he didn't write, he didn't come looking for me. And I didn't look for him either, because I knew he needed time to understand what had happened, to process the magnitude of what he had lost, and I needed time to heal. Mr. Sebastian Wells called me every 2 days to tell me how things were going. Valerie was in intensive therapy, not psychiatric, but emotional. She had fallen into a deep depression after discovering that the man she had married was having an affair with her own mother. It is too great a betrayal, Mr. Sebastian Wells told me. Too twisted. My granddaughter doesn't understand how it could have happened, and neither do I. How is she? Fragile, very fragile, but she is 18 years old. She is young. She will heal. With time, she will heal. The scandal spread like wildfire throughout the city. Social media exploded. Someone had recorded part of the confrontation at the Plaza Hotel and uploaded it to the internet. The video went viral in hours. Ethan leaving the hotel, alone, in his wrinkled suit and distraught face. Mrs. Catherine Wilson screaming at Mr. Sebastian Wells's lawyers. Valerie being taken out on a stretcher. People commented, speculated, invented theories. Some said Ethan was a victim, that Mrs. Catherine Wilson had seduced and manipulated him. Others said he was an opportunist, a fortune hunter, a man without scruples. The truth, as always, was somewhere in the middle. Ethan was not completely innocent, but he was not completely guilty either. He was a weak man who had made terrible decisions because he didn't have the courage to say no. In the second week, Mr. Sebastian Wells gave me more news. The district attorney accepted the complaint against Catherine. They are going to formally investigate her for fraud and conspiracy. How likely is it that she will go to jail? With the evidence we have, very likely. The recordings are enough. The lawyers say she could face between 8 and 15 years. 15 years. Mrs. Catherine Wilson, the woman who had humiliated me, who had manipulated my son, who had planned to harm her own daughter to keep her money, was going to pay. And Mr. Arnold? I asked. That poor devil didn't know anything. He is a drunkard who has been disconnected from his family for years. Investigators confirmed that he had nothing to do with the plan. But now he is alone. His wife is going to jail. His daughter hates him. And his business is bankrupt. Is he going to lose the house? He already lost it. The bank foreclosed on it last week. Now he is living in a rented room in Queens with a miserable pension. I didn't feel sorry for him, because Mr. Arnold had eyes, he had ears, he had been there, in that house, for years, watching his wife destroy lives, and he hadn't done anything. Sometimes complicity is as guilty as the action. In the third week, Ethan finally came looking for me. He arrived at my apartment at 8 o'clock at night, without warning. He knocked on the door with soft taps. When I opened it, I barely recognized him. He had a several-days-old beard, deep dark circles, wrinkled clothes, disheveled hair. He had lost weight. He looked destroyed. "Mum," he said, his voice broken. I stayed in the doorway without moving. "What do you want, Ethan?" "I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." "Please, Mum, just let me in." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to close the door in his face, tell him to leave, that he was no longer my son. But another part, that part that had carried that child in my arms, that had sung him lullabies, that had cleaned his scraped knees, that part couldn't tell him no. I let him in. He sat on the shop couch, the same couch where I had received the first photographs, where everything had begun to break. "Do you want coffee?" I asked, purely out of habit. "No, thank you." I sat across from him. I waited. Ethan took a long time to speak. When he finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. "I am sorry, Mum." "What are you sorry for?" "Everything. Everything I did. Everything I did to you." "And Valerie? Are you sorry for her too?" He nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Yes, especially for her. I didn't want to hurt her. I never wanted—" "But you did," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You planned to marry her, to steal her inheritance. I heard the recording, Ethan. I know what you said. I didn't— It wasn't me talking. It was Catherine." I finished for him. "Are you going to blame Catherine for your decisions?" "She manipulated me, Mum. She made me believe that I was worthless without her, that you had raised me to be mediocre, that I deserved more." Every word was like a dagger. "And you believed her?" "Yes," he whispered. "I believed her." "Why, Ethan? Why did you believe her and not me?" "Because she gave me what you could never give me." "Money?" "No, well, yes. But not only that. She gave me attention. She made me feel important. She made me feel like I was special." "I also made you feel special." "No, Mum. You made me feel guilty. Every time I came to visit you, I saw your small apartment, your old clothes, your tired hands, and I felt guilty for having more than you. Catherine never made me feel guilty. Catherine told me that I deserved everything I had." I fell silent, processing his words, and I understood something terrible. My son hadn't left me out of malice. He had left me because he couldn't stand being reminded of where he came from, because I was the mirror of his poverty, of his humble origins, of everything he wanted to forget. And Mrs. Catherine Wilson had offered him a way out, a way to become someone new, someone important, someone who didn't have a seamstress mother who reminded him of his roots. "Do you know what the saddest thing about all this is, Ethan?" I finally said. "That I never made you feel guilty. You only felt guilty because you knew, deep down, that you had abandoned me." I know, Mum, and I am so sorry." "Where have you been these weeks?" "In cheap hotels, spending the little I had left. I lost my job. No one wants to hire me. My name is all over social media. I am a joke. And the house that Mr. Arnold was going to give you? It never existed. Everything was a lie. The hardware stores are bankrupt. The Beverly Hills house is foreclosed on. There was no money, only debts. And Catherine? She is in jail, waiting for trial. Her lawyers say she is going to be sentenced between 10 and 15 years. Good, I said, without remorse. Ethan looked at me with red eyes. Don't you feel anything for her? Should I? That woman destroyed her own daughter. She corrupted you. She humiliated me. She planned a murder. Why should I feel anything for her? Because I loved her. Those words cut through me. No, Ethan, you didn't love Catherine. You were obsessed with what she represented. Power, money, status. But that is not love. Maybe you are right. We stayed in silence for a long time. Finally, Ethan asked what he had come to ask. Can I stay here, Mum? Just for a few days, until I find a job? Until I can… No, I said firmly. Mum, please, I have nowhere to go. I don't have money. I don't have… You should have thought about that before. Mum, I am your son. Yes, I interrupted him. You are my son, and that is why I am telling you no. Because if I let you stay here, if I rescue you now, you will never learn. You will never understand the weight of your decisions. So what do you want me to do? Sleep on the street? I want you to do what I did when your father abandoned us. I want you to get up, to work, to rebuild your life with your own hands, without shortcuts, without manipulations, without depending on anyone but yourself. I can't, Mum. I am not as strong as you. Then learn how to be. Ethan got up from the couch. He looked at me with a mixture of pain, rage, and desperation. Someday you will forgive me, Mum. Someday you will. Maybe, I interrupted him. But that day is not today, or tomorrow, or next month. Maybe in years, or maybe never. That depends on you, on who you decide to be from now on. And what if I change? What if I become someone better? Then maybe, just maybe, we can talk again. But not as mother and son, but as two people who once knew each other, and who need to learn to know each other again. Ethan nodded, crying, walked toward the door, opened it, and before leaving, he turned around one last time. I love you, Mum. I know, I replied. But love without respect means nothing. He left. I closed the door, and I stood there, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. I didn't cry, because there was nothing to cry about. I had done the right thing, the hardest thing, the most painful thing, but the right thing. That night, as I drank coffee in my clay mug and looked out the window, I thought about everything that had happened. About how Mrs. Catherine Wilson, that woman who thought she was so powerful, so intelligent, so superior, had ended up alone in a cell. About how Mr. Arnold, who had hidden behind alcohol for years, had lost everything he ever had. About how Ethan, who had sought wealth and status at any cost, had ended up with nothing. No money, no family, no dignity. And about how I, the humble woman, the seamstress, the mother no one respected, was still here, with my small apartment, with my shop, with my tired hands, with my clay mug, but with something they never had: peace, because life always collects its debts. Not with violence, not with revenge, but with time, with patience, with the silent justice that arrives when you least expect it. Mrs. Catherine Wilson had called me crazy once. Years later, I knew she was alone in that cell, looking at the empty walls, with no visitors, no love, no nothing. And I wondered if in that moment, in that terrible emptiness, she finally understood what she had lost. Not the money, not the status, but her humanity, her soul, everything that makes a life worthwhile. And Ethan, my poor Ethan, maybe someday he would understand that true wealth is not in what you have, it is in who you are, in how you treat people, in the dignity with which you face your mistakes. But that day had not come yet, and I couldn't wait for it, because my life, my precious life, continued on, with or without him. 2 years have passed since that night. 2 years since I saw my son leave my apartment, without a dime in his pocket and without a place to go. 2 years since I decided that the greatest love I could give him was to let him face the consequences of his own decisions. And in these 2 years, I have learned things I never thought I would have to learn. I have learned that silence can be more powerful than 1,000 words, that dignity is not negotiable, that forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and that sometimes letting go of someone you love is the bravest act you can do. My life has changed, not in spectacular ways. I didn't become rich. I didn't move to a big house. I didn't stop sewing. But it changed in what matters, in the depths, in the soul. I still live in my apartment in Brooklyn. I still work in my shop. I still prepare my coffee every morning in the same clay mug I have used for years. But I no longer feel invisible. I no longer feel small. I no longer allow anyone to make me feel less than I am, because I understood something fundamental. A person's worth is not in how much money they have, or in what neighborhood they live in, or who they associate with. A person's worth is in their ability to stand up when everything falls apart, in their ability to choose what is right, even if it hurts, in their ability to forgive themselves for not having been perfect. Mr. Sebastian Wells became a very dear friend. He comes to visit me every 2 weeks. He always brings donuts from his favorite bakery and coffee he prepares himself at his old house in Boston. We sit in the shop among scraps of fabric and spools of thread and talk about life, about what it has been like to raise children in difficult times, about how it hurts to see that the people we love take the wrong paths, about how old age teaches you that in the end, the only thing that matters is being able to look in the mirror and recognize the person you see. "Valerie asked about you last week," he told me on his last visit. "Yes," I asked, surprised. "How is she?" "Better, much better. She finished therapy last month. She started studying psychology. She says she wants to help other women who have gone through what she went through." I am so happy to hear that. "She wants to meet you, Laura. She says she wants to thank you for saving her." I felt a knot in my throat. "I didn't save her. I just did what I had to do." "That is exactly what saving someone means," Mr. Sebastian Wells replied with a sad smile. "Doing the right thing, even if it costs you everything." Valerie came to visit me one afternoon in October. She arrived alone, unannounced, knocking timidly on the shop door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. She was no longer the fragile, frightened girl I had seen at the wedding. Now there was something different about her, something stronger, more mature. "Mrs. Laura," she said softly, "may I come in?" "Of course." "Sweetie, come in." She sat on the shop couch, the same one where Ethan had sat 2 years ago. I made her coffee. We talked about things that weren't important for a few minutes, The weather, her studies, how she liked living with her grandfather, until she finally gathered the courage to say what she had come to say. I want to thank you for everything you did. You don't have to thank me for anything, Valerie. Yes, I do, she insisted with tears in her eyes. You saved my life, literally. If you hadn't called my grandfather, if you hadn't done something, I did it because it was the right thing to do, because you are a good girl who didn't deserve what they were doing to you. My mum, her voice broke. My own mum planned. I know, sweetie, I know. Valerie cried for a long time. I sat next to her and stroked her hair, as I would have done with a daughter, because in a way, in that moment, she needed a mother, a real mother, not the one she had had, but the one she deserved to have. How did you get over it? She asked me when she calmed down. How did you manage to move on after everything that happened with Ethan? I took a deep breath. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I wanted to call him, rescue him, tell him that everything was okay and that he could come home. But I knew that if I did that, he would never learn. He would never change. And has he changed? I don't know, I admitted. 6 months ago, he wrote me a letter. He told me he got a job in a factory, that he is living in a small room in New Jersey, that he is going to therapy, that he is trying to be better. Did you answer him? No, not yet. Why? Because I need to be sure that he is changing for himself, not for me. I need to know that he is doing the internal work that he has to do, and that takes time. Valerie nodded, thoughtful. I am also doing that work. In therapy, I learned that I can't blame myself for what my mum did, that it wasn't my responsibility to detect that something was wrong, that I was just a girl who trusted the wrong people. Exactly, I said, taking her hand. And now you are a woman who is learning to trust again, but the right people, starting with yourself. Valerie stayed all afternoon. She helped me sew the hem of a wedding dress. She told me about her plans to someday open a support centre for women victims of abuse. And when she left, she hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for being the mother that my own mother never was." That night I cried, not out of sadness, but out of something more complex, because I had lost a son, but in a way I had gained a daughter, not by blood, but by heart. 3 months ago, I received news about Mrs. Catherine Wilson. Mr. Sebastian Wells called me one morning with a grave voice. "Laura, I need to tell you something about Catherine." What happened? She was sentenced, 12 years in prison, with no possibility of early release. How is she? Destroyed. Physically, she has deteriorated a lot. No one visits her, not even Mr. Arnold. She is completely alone. And how do you feel about that? Relieved, but also sad, because that woman is the mother of my daughter, and despite everything she did, a part of me remembers the girl she once was. I understood what Mr. Sebastian Wells felt, because I also remembered the boy Ethan had been, before the world changed him, before bad decisions defined him, and I wondered if he could ever be that boy again, or if that boy had died forever. Ethan's letter arrived 2 weeks ago. It was longer than the first, more honest, more vulnerable. He told me that he had started attending a support group for people who had made serious mistakes, that he was learning to live with the guilt without letting it destroy him, that he was saving every dollar so that someday he could pay me back all the money he had borrowed and never paid me. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Mum," he wrote. "I don't expect us to be what we were. I just hope that someday, when you see me on the street, you don't cross the street to avoid me. I just hope you know that every day I wake up trying to be a better man than I was yesterday. And every day I think of you, how I treated you, how I failed you, How I let a woman convince me that you were the problem, when you were the only person who truly loved me. Sometimes I pass by your building. I don't knock. I don't go up. I just stand there on the sidewalk, looking at your window, wondering what you are doing, if you are sewing, if you are drinking coffee, if you ever think of me. And then I leave, because I know that I don't have the right to bother you. I don't have the right to ask you for anything else. But I want you to know something, Mum. Something I never told you enough when I should have. Thank you. Thank you for raising me alone. Thank you for sacrificing so much. Thank you for giving me opportunities that you never had. And thank you for having the courage to let me fall when I needed it most. Because now I understand that you didn't let me fall out of hatred, you let me fall out of love. And that was the greatest gift you could give me. I love you, Mum. I have always loved you, even if my actions said otherwise. Your son, Ethan. I read that letter 5 times. I cried with every reading. And then I put it away in the drawer where I keep important things, next to the first photo of Ethan when he was a baby, next to his graduation diploma, next to a note he wrote me when he was 8 years old that said, "Mum, you are my hero." I haven't answered him yet, but I think I will soon, because I have learned that forgiveness is not forgetting what happened. Forgiveness is remembering what happened, feeling the pain, and still choosing to move forward without carrying that weight in your heart. It doesn't mean I am going to forget. It doesn't mean things are going to go back to how they were. But it means I am ready to build something new, something different, a relationship based not on what we were, but on what we can be. Last night I had a dream. I dreamed I was sitting in my shop, sewing, when there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and it was Ethan, but not the Ethan of now, nor the Ethan who betrayed me. It was the boy, my boy, with his big eyes and his innocent smile. "Mom," he said, "I lost my way, but I think I found it again." And I hugged him and I cried, and I said, "Welcome home, honey." When I woke up, I had tears on my cheeks, and I knew that dream was a sign, not that everything was resolved, but that I was ready to start healing, to start forgiving, not just Ethan, but myself, for not having been the perfect mother, for not having protected him from everything, for not having seen the signs earlier. Because the truth is that none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, we all hurt people we love, we all get lost at some point. But what defines us are not the mistakes we make, it is what we do afterwards. If we learn, if we grow, if we get up, or if we stay there, on the floor, blaming others for our fall. This morning, as I prepared my coffee in my clay mug, I looked out the window and saw the streets of Brooklyn filling with people. People in a hurry, people with problems, people with dreams, people with pain. And I understood that we are all part of the same story, a story of mistakes and redemptions, of falls and rises, of losses and discoveries. And my story, this story I have told you, is just one more among millions. But it is mine, and I am proud of it, because I survived, because I did not break, because I maintained my dignity when everything around me was collapsing, and because I learned that true strength is not in never falling, it is in getting up every time you fall. I am now 61 years old, 2 years older than when this story began, and I feel like I have lived an entire lifetime in these 2 years. I still sew wedding dresses for girls who dream of eternal love, and every time I sew, I think of Valerie in her strapless dress, in how that day she thought she was starting the best stage of her life. And I pray that someday, when she is ready, she finds a real love, a love that sees her, that respects her, that values her, not for her money, not for her last name, but for who she is. And I pray for Ethan, because despite everything, he is still my son. And a mother never stops praying for her children, even if they have hurt her, even if they have betrayed her, even if they have made her cry until she ran out of tears. A mother's love has no limits, but now I know that it also should not have conditions that allow abuse. Love must be firm, honest, brave. Love must tell the truth, even if it hurts. It must set boundaries, even if it costs. It must let go, even if it wants to cling, because only in this way, with that difficult and brave love, can we help the people we love become the best they can be. If my story helps even one woman open her eyes, if it helps even one mother understand that loving does not mean allowing, if it helps even one person choose dignity over comfort, then everything will have been worth it. Every tear, every pain, every sleepless night, every difficult decision, everything. Because this story is not only mine, it is for all the women who have been humiliated and have chosen to stand up, for all the mothers who have had to let go of their children to save them, for all the people who have faced betrayal and have chosen forgiveness without forgetting. This story is for you who are listening to me, for you who are perhaps going through something similar, for you who don't know if you are going to be able to survive the pain you feel today. I want you to know something. Yes, you can. You are going to be able to, because you are stronger than you think, because you have more worth than you imagine, and because pain, no matter how terrible, doesn't last forever. Time heals everything. It doesn't erase it, but it heals it. And one day, maybe months or years later, you are going to wake up and realize that breathing doesn't hurt so much anymore, that thinking about what happened no longer destroys you, that you can remember without bleeding. And that day, you will understand that you survived, that you won, not because you destroyed the one who hurt you, but because you didn't let them destroy you. I close this story with the same clay mug in my hands, the one that has accompanied me for years, the one that knows the taste of my coffee on difficult mornings, the one that has held tears and hopes, the one that has never failed me. Because in the end, the simplest things are the ones that remain. The most humble are the strongest, and the most ignored are the most valuable. Like me, like you, like all the women who have been underestimated and have shown that they are made of steel. Thank you for listening to me until the end. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. And remember, life always collects its debts, not with revenge, but with truth, with time, with silent justice, and in the end, always, always, good triumphs. Maybe not in the way we expected, maybe not when we expected it, but it triumphs because the universe has a memory, and no one escapes the consequences of their own actions. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and hit the bell to hear more stories of women who transformed their pain into wisdom. Every day, a woman, a life lesson. Share this story with someone you love. Sometimes a story like this can change an entire day. God bless you, and until next time.